Wuhan's deadly pandemic may have actually been created in a biolab and released in malice. Trump comes under fire for saying he'll adjourn the government if they don't keep confirming his judges. 4 Michigan counties may actually become sanctuary counties as we go along here, and we will read a MacIver Institute article that may confirm what I've been saying all along about the Wisconsin election. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. What a week. Does anybody notice that you're hearing a lot less about the death tolls as we go along into the mainstream news? It just seems I open up the news and the first thing I used to hear all the time was this many people died and this is how many people are contracting the disease. We have this many new cases, and I'm not hearing so much of that anymore. Now it seems to be more of the fallout from the stimulus package and more political bickering and fighting. So I think we might have this beat at this point, and the mainstream, media wants to make sure that we move transitionally smoothly into the very next crisis that they're going to try and end the world over. So this quote that I have from Austin Peterson kind of sums that up perfectly, too, and I want to start out with reading that. AP for Liberty 20 hours ago over on Twitter. It's not about the virus anymore, it's about control. And when there were a few people that replied to that said, yeah, it was always about control, which it kind of was. So we'll look into that. But before we get any further into any of our news, make sure you head on over to freedomscoop.com. We want to be your one-stop shop for all of your news and commentary. We have great shows over there. We have this show. We have Ed's World Gaming. We've got a lot of Ed's World over there. The Generational Gap is over there, and all the mini shows that Stephen Ignoramus puts on. Wyatt Birkenhoff and the R-Rated Conservative round everything out, and for the first time being announced here, we are going to be welcoming and carrying the Freckles and Brit show coming up. I don't know if it's going to hit this episode 4, but by episode 5, we should have everything set up and they should be on there. So go check Freckles and Brit out and make sure you get them a sub. We're really happy to have them over there. So let's start with talking about the stocks. Dow Jones Futures coronavirus stock market rally faces key test as jobless claims loom. Apple, Tesla near technical high. This is from Ed Carson over at Investors Business Daily. Dow Jones Futures paired gains early Thursday, while S&P 500 futures and Nasdaq futures rose modestly amid strong earnings from Taiwan Semiconductor and ahead of initial jobless claims data this morning. The coronavirus stock market rally suffered a down session Wednesday. It wasn't really that down. It was more even than down. I mean, they went down in futures, but for the most part, it was more even than down. Suffered a down session Wednesday amid grim economic data, but growth stocks continue to outperform. Dexcom, Zscaler, Activision Blizzard cleared buy point. Blizzard is back in the news? Really? Wow. I guess people don't care about Blitzchung anymore. Cleared buy points while recent breakouts held up. Meanwhile, Tesla stock and Apple stock are both flirting with key bullish technical readings. Is it okay? Is it technically okay to play Blizzard games again? Did I miss that memo somewhere? I've been kind of on a Blizzard boycott since the Blitzchung thing went on, but I do get the itch sometimes to go back and play StarCraft 2 again. And I know I paid for it, so I should be enjoying it because I paid for it. But because so much of it is online and you see the ads for it that are paid in there when you go onto the online launcher, I don't want to give them the money for that. Taiwan Semiconductor reported better than expected earnings early Thursday, with quarter one revenue up 45%. TCMC also guided higher on quarter two revenue. The chip foundry makes chips for Apple, Advanced Micro Devices, Nvidia, and more. Taiwan Semi stock rose 4% before the open, with Apple stock, AMD stock, and Nvidia stock all climbing modestly. The Nasdaq Composite held up better than the Dow Jones and S&P 500 on Wednesday, continuing to outperform its outperformance streak. but it closed just below key levels, setting up a test for the coronavirus stock market rally. Zscaler stock cleared a buy point Wednesday as cybersecurity stocks continued to improve. Dexcom stock decisively broke out after Monday's move into a buy zone was short-lived. Activision stock also broke out as the video game publisher is seen as a winner from coronavirus shutdowns. Well, I could see that completely. I mean, I complain about the Blizzard games because I grew up on them. They made me very happy in my young days. I'm a big Diablo fan. But keep in mind that Activision also carries Call of Duty. With all the kids being home and getting through their schoolwork probably fairly quickly since they're at home with no distractions, they're getting done with all that schoolwork and heading right over to the console to go shoot up some people across the world and teabag their corpses. So that's probably why Activision is going up. I'm sure your Fortnites are going up too at this point. Does anybody play Fortnite anymore? You never hear about it anymore. Tesla extended its gain as it races up the right side of a very deep base. Apple stock held above its 50-day moving average, while Tesla stock and Apple stock are well off their February all-time peaks. Their relative strength lines are right at record highs. The RS line, the blue line in the charts below, tracks the stock's performance versus the S&P 500 index. The RS lines for Zscaler stock, Dexcom stock, and Activision stock are also near record highs as they generally outperform in the coronavirus stock market rally. Dexcom stock is in the IBD leaderboard and the IBD 50 list. So we'll see what happens today. It looks like futures were supposed to be up today, and I know we had it was kind of a break-even day. It wasn't really, it was a little bit low, but not like the lows that we've been seeing as we go along here. So let's have a look at what else we have going on. From CNBC, Dow futures jump 100 points even after another dismal jobless claims report from Fred Imbert and Thomas Frank. Well, once again, the federal government is telling people, hey, you better not go to work. Don't go to work. Futures contracts tied to the major U.S. stock indices rose on Thursday even after the release of more dismal unemployment data. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures jumped to trade more than 100 points higher, or 0.7%. S&P 500 futures climbed 0.8%, while NASDAQ 100 futures gained 1.1%. The Labor Department said 5.245 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits in the week of April 11th. Last week's claims total brought the number of job losses to 22 million during the coronavirus outbreak. The Philadelphia Federal Reserve's Business Conditions Index hit its lowest level since July 1980 as activity in the region slumped this month. U.S. housing starts plunged 22.3% in March. Thursday's moves followed a slump during regular trading on Wednesday as gloomy economic data and anemic bank earnings fueled concerns over the coronavirus's impact on the U.S. economy. The Dow Jones dropped 445.41 points, or 1.9%, to 23,504 during Wednesday's session. The S&P 500 slid 2.2%, while the NASDAQ closed 1.4% lower. Stocks were pressured by disappointing retail sales and manufacturing report. No. Nobody's allowed to go to the store? And retail sales are down? No way. And manufacturing reports in the prior session. Traders cited a plunge in March retail sales as a principal weight on equities in Wednesday. The worse-than-expected data showed retail sales during the month of March plunged a record 8.7%, the largest one-month decline since the department began tracking the series in 1992. Manufacturing in the New York area also slumped by its biggest margin ever, to a historic low, surpassing levels seen in the throes of the Great Recession. Despite the recent dismal economic data, some market strategists pointed to a slowdown in the daily number of new U.S. coronavirus cases and the flattening in the net number of hospitalizations in New York State as evidence that markets may trend upward in the coming weeks. JP Morgan's Marko Kolanovic said Wednesday evening that such improvements in healthcare data could encourage state governments to take baby steps to reopen certain economies as soon as next week. Kolanovic, the global head of quantitative and derivative strategy at JP Morgan, reiterated his forecast that the U.S. equity market could reach new all-time highs as soon as the first half of 2021 if the economy is set to recover later that year. Better healthcare figures mean we think it's going to be possible to reopen it sooner. We think within a week from now you'll start seeing some limited moves, he told CNBC's Fast Money. It's going to be limited. I'm talking baby steps, he added, but that tells us that by summertime we may more substantially recover. And sometime next year, maybe the second half of next year, the economy reaches the high water mark, which means the market could reach a high water mark in the first half of next year. Now, we'll see what happens there. This is probably somebody who's not going to be working for very much longer because he's saying news that's going to be devastating to the left-wing cause of trying to get the president out due to a poor economy. But we shall see. It's looking, like I said, yesterday we're almost halfway there to getting the economy, or the Dow Jones rather, back to where it was before all this crash happened. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to watch. All right, now for the news that's on the title card here, and this is something that was dismissed as tinfoil hattery as recently as a week ago. People were saying that if you said this, you were just some tinfoil hatter that hated China and wanted to see China torn down and want to see Chinese people beaten in the streets and all sorts of other accusations that they were laying on other people. But this is from Fox News, which means it's NewsGuard verified and it's green checked. Sources believe coronavirus outbreak originated in Wuhan lab as part of China's effort to compete with the U.S. This is from Brett Baer and Greg Ree. There is increasing confidence that the COVID-19 outbreak likely originated in a Wuhan laboratory, though not as a bioweapon but as part of China's attempt to demonstrate that its efforts to identify and combat viruses are equal or greater than the capabilities of the United States. Multiple sources who have been briefed on the details of early actions by China's government and seen relevant materials tell Fox News. This may be the costliest government cover-up of all time, one of the sources said. The sources believe the initial transmission of the virus, a naturally occurring strain that was being studied there, was bat to human, and that patient 0 worked at the laboratory and then went into the population in Wuhan. The increasing confidence comes from classified and open source documents and evidence, the sources said. Fox News has requested to see the evidence directly. Sources emphasized, as is often the case with intelligence, that it's not definitive and should not be characterized as such. Some inside the administration and the intelligence and epidemiological communities are more skeptical, and the investigation is continuing. What all of the sources agree about is the extensive cover-up of data and information about COVID-19 orchestrated by the Chinese government. So this is another case of sources say, and I do hate that case in the mainstream media. If I were to just say sources say and do it on this show, the mainstreams would be all over me to get my channel shut down and saying that I was a hack and a partisan and all the other things that they're guilty of. But because they're green check and NewsGuard certified, they can just say sources say. Tell me who the sources are. And this is my complaint with CNN, MSNBC, Fox, and all the other big mainstreams. Tell us who the sources are. And I do realize that there's classification involved in some of this. And this, once again, it's not definitive, but the fact that somebody NewsGuard is saying it means that we maybe should be paying attention to it, at least a little bit, before we just dismiss it outright as in the same dustbin of history as theories that 5G caused the coronavirus outbreak, because those are floating around too. So, it's possible. And I'm sure that they've done a lot more legwork and homework to verify this before they put it out on the air, but maybe they haven't. The mainstream media doesn't have to do such things. Let's move on. So this is going on to a discussion that seems to be going on over in the live chat here. 4 Michigan sheriffs say they won't strictly enforce Whitmer's stay-at-home order. So we have 4 sanctuary counties from tyranny over in Michigan. That's kind of exciting to see. This is from Morgan Phillips over at Fox News. Sheriffs from 4 different Michigan counties said Wednesday that they will not strictly enforce Governor Gretchen Whitmer's social distancing restrictions that... Oh, excuse me. A little bit of a phlegmy cough there. I'm sorry. Where's my cough button? Oh, that kind of snuck up on me. I apologize to everybody because that was directly into the microphone. To enforce Governor Gretchen Whitmer's social distancing restrictions that critics say have gone too far. While we understand her desire to protect the public, we question some restrictions that she has imposed as overstepping her executive authority. Leelanau County Sheriff Mark Borkovich, Benzie County Sheriff Ted Schendel, Manistee County Sheriff Ken Falk, and Mason County Sheriff Kim Cole said in a press release. You know what really weirds me out about all of this? Before January, we had never heard of Gretchen Whitmer at all. She gave the rebuttal speech to the State of the Union, which is a pointless endeavor and exercise in my opinion. I don't know why they continue to do that, but whatever. They can waste their taxpayer money however they want. But we never heard about this woman, and now she's in like every news story out there. They are grooming her to be the vice presidential nominee. I promise you. And they're trying to make it okay. They're trying to make it so that you accept the fact that she could be president because Biden's not making it 4 years. I don't care if he's the president or not at this point. Joe Biden is not making it 4 years. While we understand her desire to protect the public, we question some restrictions that she has imposed. Oh, I read that one already. She has created a vague framework of emergency laws that only confuse Michigan citizens, the sheriff said, according to Michigan Live. The sheriff said that instead of stringent enforcement, they will deal with every case as an individual situation and apply common sense. They added that they had taken an oath to protect the God-given rights of the Michigan and U.S. constitutions. We believe that we are the last line of defense in protecting your civil liberties, the release stated. The sheriffs noted that their focus should be on reopening their counties and getting people back to work, but added that CDC guidelines such as social distancing, washing hands, and wearing masks should be followed. Whitmer enacted a stay-at-home order March 24th that was originally set to expire April 13th, before being extended to April 30th. On the weekend, Whitmer announced an expansion of her order, which among other things prohibits residents from visiting family or friends with the exception of providing care, bans public or private gatherings of any size or family ties and places, restrictions on what essential businesses which remain open may sell. Whitmer, who had to issue clarifications to her orders, most notably when someone tweeted a picture from Walmart saying that children's car seats were non-essential items, has so far remained steady in her resolve that Michigan needs to stick to strict stay-at-home measures in order to tackle the virus. In a protest dubbed Operation Gridlock, hundreds of cars and trucks descended on Michigan's state capitol Wednesday in a noisy protest, creating bumper-to-bumper traffic throughout downtown Lansing. Demonstrators blasted their horns, waved American flags, and hoisted placards deriding Whitmer's orders and demanding that she reopen the state's economy. Let's start with the fact that some counties have no or very few COVID cases and yet are totally shut down, Roseanne Ponkowski, president of the Michigan Conservative Coalition, which organized the protest, said in a statement. When did a one-size solution solve everyone's local issues? Governor Whitmer will put you out of business before allowing mere citizens to be responsible for their own behavior. That is madness. Michigan has the 4th largest number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the United States, with more than 27,000 being reported as of Wednesday evening, according to the Center for Systems Science and Engineering at Johns Hopkins University. So, Those of you in Michigan, you know where you have to go. And speaking of draconian measures here, Darth Spartacus over on Discord, one of the members of the Deplorable Batcave, got me this an executive order from the state of Maryland. Order of the Government of the State of Maryland, number 20-04-15-01, requiring use of face coverings under certain circumstances and requiring implementation of certain physical distancing measures. We're going to kind of skim over this one here because it's a lot of legalese and not a lot of anything else. But state of emergency was proclaimed on March 5th, 2020, renewed March 17th, 2020. Respiratory disease that spreads easily from person to person and may result in serious illness. To reduce the spread, the CDC recommended canceling large gatherings. We all know that. This is all definitions of why. So, okay. CDC says no gatherings and that this is a respiratory disease. Now therefore, I, Lawrence J. Hogan, Jr., Governor of the State of Maryland, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and laws of Maryland, including, but not limited to, Title 14 of the Public Safety Article, and in an effort to control and prevent the spread of COVID-19 within the state, do hereby order. Face coverings means a covering that fully covers a person's nose and mouth but is not a medical grade mask. Food service establishments, medical grade mask, public transportation, these are all definitions. Retail establishments, use of face coverings, this is the important part. Effective as of 7 a.m. April 18th, all riders and operators on any public transport are required to wear a mask. All customers over the age of 9 are required to wear a mask. Adults accompanying the children 2 through 9 shall use reasonable effort to cause those children to wear a mask. All retail establishments shall require a staff to wear, and the staff shall wear, masks. All food service establishments shall require staff who interact with customers to wear a mask. Single-use face coverings should be properly discarded in trash receptacles. Wearing a medical-grade mask satisfies any requirement in paragraph 2. All retail establishments where a queue is expected to form, 6 feet spacing, sanitize or provide customers with means to sanitize handles of carts and baskets, provide staff and customers with clean restrooms stocked with soap and sanitizer, post signage at each entrance advising customers about the requirement to wear masks. And this is where it gets draconian, and this is why it was brought up to my attention. Well, it was brought up to my attention in a complaint, but this is why I chose to use this. General provisions. Each law enforcement officer of the state or a political subdivision shall execute and enforce this order. B. A person who knowingly and willfully violates this order is guilty of a misdemeanor and on conviction is subject to both imprisonment, not exceeding 1 year, or a fine not exceeding $5,000, or both. This order remains in effect until after termination of the state of emergency and the proclamation of the catastrophic health emergency has been rescinded, or until rescinded, superseded, amended, or revised by additional orders. The effect of any statute, rule, or regulation of an agency of the state or a political subdivision inconsistent with this order is hereby suspended. The underlined paragraph headings in this order are for convenience of reference and shall not affect the interpretation of this order. And finally, if any provision of this order or its application to any person, entity, or circumstance is held invalid by any court of competent jurisdiction, all other provisions or applications of this order shall remain in effect to the extent possible without the invalid provision or application. To achieve this purpose, and provisions of this order are severable. Issued under my hand this 15th day of April 2020 and effective immediately, Lawrence J. Hogan, Jr., Governor. So, basically what I read out of that last section was, even if the court overturns this, you still got to do it. $5,000 for not wearing a mask in public. Fuck that. Seriously. If there's not a revolution after all of this, I don't know what's wrong with the people of this country. Hell, I'm getting to a point where I'm expecting to see it during all of this. All right. That's enough legalese for the day. Let's get back to the news. So, from the Hill, this is something, I read this and I put this up into my reference page on the Discord, which if you're not on the Discord, get on the Discord because then you can go ahead and add news articles to see. And if they're not NewsGuard certified, they at least give me a jumping off point to go find something that is NewsGuard certified. So put anything you see in there, and I will do the research on it and find something to do with this show. From the Hill, GOP lawmaker, we must choose loss of American lives over loss of our way of life as Americans. And Midget B over in the Discord server came out right away and said, well, I love to see it when GOP lawmakers are misinterpreted and misquoted like this. So this is from Justine Coleman over at the Hill. Representative Trey Hollingsworth of Indiana said Tuesday, as the U.S. grapples with the coronavirus pandemic, that the country will always have to choose a loss of American lives over a loss of our way of life as American. Hollingsworth told Indianapolis's WIBC radio that there is no zero harm option when it comes to deciding when and how to reopen the American economy. Both of these decisions will lead to harm for individuals, whether that's dramatic economic harm or whether that's the loss of life, he said. But it is always the American government's position to say, in the choice between the loss of our way of life as American and the loss of life of American lives, we always have to choose the latter. Hollingsworth said that the decision that would do the most good for the most people would be to get Americans back to work. The Indiana lawmaker added that no amount of legislation out of D.C. is going to fix this crisis. It is policymakers' decision that we put on our big boy and big girl pants and say, this is the lesser of two evils, he said. That is our responsibility, and to abdicate that is to insult the Americans that voted us into office, he added. Political leaders in the U.S. are involved in an intense debate over whether the country should reopen its economy as outbreaks of the coronavirus persist in multiple states. Experts worry that keeping the economy shut down could be even more damaging in the long term than the virus, while health officials say COVID-19 could resurge in the U.S. or if the U.S. reopens now. Reached for further comment by the Hill, Hollingsworth said, it's hyperbolic to say that the only choices before us are the two corner solutions, no economy or widespread casualties. We can use the best of biology and economics to enable as much of the economy to operate as possible while we work to minimize disease transmission. President Trump said Monday he has the authority to decide whether to reopen businesses and schools in states where the government shut them down. No, he doesn't. Several lawmakers and state leaders, including New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, contradicted this, saying it goes against the Constitution. Yes, it does. So, yeah, that was taken wildly out of context. So, yeah, they're looking for anything that they can pin on people. This has become a campaign thing at this point. They're stopping sharing the numbers of deaths because it doesn't go along with the panic and the fear porn that they were trying to push off forever, and now they're taking anything they can out of context. So, thank you, The Hill. Now, from the Daily Wire. This did not have to happen. McConnell-McCarthy blast Democrats for blocking funds for small businesses. This is from Daily Wire News. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy slammed Democrats and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in a statement on Wednesday for refusing to replenish the Paycheck Protection Program of the CARES Act, which will result in harm to Americans. The Small Business Administration and the Department of the Treasury report that the Paycheck Protection Program will exhaust its funding in a matter of hours, the two said in a statement. It will have to stop accepting applications for job-saving loans. Democrats have spent days blocking emergency funding for Americans' paychecks, and now the bipartisan program has run dry. No way! You tell people that they can't open their businesses and offer them loans to do that, with a finite amount of money that's attached to it, and wonder why it's going to run dry. Oh, this is great. This did not have to happen. Republicans have been sounding the alarm for more than a week, the statement continued. Last Thursday, Senate Republicans tried to pass a narrow and clean bill that would have simply put more money into this critical program without changing any of the underlying policies. that passed the Senate and House unanimously. Democrats blocked it, even as the program is saving millions of American jobs. Speaker Pelosi has said she sees no data as to why we need to keep funding it. The news comes as large swaths of the American economy has been effectively closed for the last weeks due to the coronavirus outbreak that originated in Wuhan, China. The U.S., which has led the world in widespread testing, has nearly 630,000 cases and over 25,000 reported deaths from the virus. The hardest hit states in the U.S. are New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Michigan, and California. All very left-wing states historically, I might add. The New York City area has been hit by far the hardest in the country, accounting for nearly a third of all the coronavirus cases in the U.S. and accounting for nearly half the deaths in the U.S. It has been stunning to watch our Democratic colleagues treat emergency funding for Americans' paychecks like a Republican priority, which they need to be goaded into supporting. The statement continued, funding a bipartisan program should not be a partisan issue. Yeah, you lost that ship under Obama and partially under Bush. I hate to tell you this. The notion that crucial help for working people is not appealing enough to Democrats without other additions sends a strange message about their priorities. Yeah. You lost the bipartisan thing when Harry Reid said he wasn't going to confirm any more judges under the Bush administration. I thought this had numbers in it. I guess it didn't. Oh, yeah, there was in the statement. The Wall Street Journal reported, I skipped over this because I thought it was just an image. The Paycheck Protection Program was on track to exhaust most of its initial allocation of $350 billion in the early morning hours Thursday, with the Small Business Administration saying it had approved more than 1.5 million loans valued at more than $324 billion as of late Wednesday, and loans were continuing to be processed. Both Democrats and Republicans want to add $250 billion to the Small Business Aid Program, but have been sparring for days as to whether to add restrictions to the funds. Democrats want to expand access to the loans as well as include more money for hospitals, food assistance, and state and local governments. Republicans, meanwhile, said they want to keep the bill focused on increasing small business and defer other funding debates until the next broader legislation is crafted. Yes, single-line bills, please. Single-line bills. Don't put pork in. And that goes for both sides, by the way. No more pork. And once again, I have to ask this question to both Democrats and Republicans in Congress. Where is that $250 billion coming from? Because the GDP is supposed to shrink this quarter. That means lower tax receipts. That means just like this stupid check that you're sending out to everybody else, you're printing this out of thin air. So keep that in mind as we go forward on this argument. I understand the fact that small businesses do need the funding to try and make sure that there are still small businesses for people to go back to work to, but at some point, the money printer is going to break. Or the currency value is going to, one of the two. Gavin Newsom has joined the ranks of people that have been recalled as governors. California's Newsom announces a $125 million fund to give coronavirus stimulus checks to immigrants in the state illegally. This is from Andrew O'Reilly over at Fox News. California Governor Gavin Newsom announced on Wednesday plans to give cash payments to adult immigrants living illegally in the state to help them weather the coronavirus crisis. The plan, which would use a mix of taxpayer money and charitable donations from corporations and philanthropists, will give 150,000 adults $500 each during the coronavirus outbreak, the governor said. California has an estimated 2 million immigrants living in the country illegally. They have not been eligible for the $2.2 trillion stimulus package approved by Congress last month, which pledged cash payments to most Americans while boosting unemployment benefits by $600 per week. We feel a deep sense of gratitude for people that are in fear of deportations that are still addressing essential needs of tens of millions of Californians, said Newsom, a Democrat who noted 10% of the state's workforce consisted of immigrants living in the country illegally who paid over $2.5 billion in state and local taxes last year. Yeah, that's always the go-to that they go to. Oh, well, they're paying so much taxes right now. Do the paperwork then. You know how you stop worrying about deportation? Do the paperwork. Taxpayers would be kicking in $75 million for the money, while a group of charities has committed to raise another $50 million for a total of $125 million. A group of charities has already donated the $5.5 million for the fund, including the Emerson Collective, Blue Shield of California Foundation, the California Endowment, the James Irvine Foundation, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and an anonymous donor. So this is not all coming from the taxpayer, but still $75 million is a huge taxpayer amount, especially when the GDP is supposed to be shrinking. And California, keep in mind, has a pretty substantial state debt to the United States government. That's something you have to keep in mind as we're going forward on this as well. Newsom said the money will not be distributed based on income. Their personal information will not be required to get the support. Of course it won't. California has been the most aggressive state in the nation when it came to giving benefits to immigrants living in the country illegally. Last year, California became the first state to give taxpayer-funded health benefits to low-income adults 25 and younger living in the country illegally. This year, Newsom has proposed expanding those benefits to seniors 65 and older. The move by California came as some Democrats in D.C. have been lobbying to include payments to illegal immigrants in the stimulus package. The $2 trillion stimulus package, recently passed by Congress, which President Trump signed into law, is giving small business loans and assistance in the form of direct payments of $1,200 per adult and $500 per child. The latter has been distributed to people with Social Security numbers. So, I found out about this article because one of the trending hashtags going around Twitter was Recall Gavin Newsom, to follow up with Recall Gretchen Whitmer, that had been they said impeach Gretchen Whitmer, but she would actually be recalled in her state. But, yeah, the recalls were going around because, Whitmer's a tyrant at this point, and it looks like Hogan over in Maryland is just about as bad, and, yeah. Now Newsom wants to give away taxpayer money. So, this is going to be an interesting political year. I can see this already. I'm kind of excited for it all. So this has been an interesting one, and it was something that kind of crossed my mind as we were first talking about this. As they first started talking about sending out these checks, is what's going to happen to people with the federal student loans? Because, they can garnish your tax return. They can garnish your tax refund already for all of that. So what are they going to do with this? Because that's going to wipe out the benefits for most of the millennial generation at this point. But millions of Americans could lose stimulus payments to debt collectors. This is from Katie Labosco over at CNN. Millions of people received their stimulus payments from the federal government this week, but some are at risk of immediately losing the money if they owe credit card, medical, or private student loan debts. A loophole in the law could mean some of the Americans who are most in need of emergency aid don't get the money. About a third of Americans, some 71 million adults, have debt in collections that could be impacted, according to the National Consumer Law Center. The $2.2 trillion congressional coronavirus relief plan passed in March did not shield the stimulus payments from certain private debt collectors, though it specifically protected the money from being taken to cover unpaid taxes or federal student loan payments. The law does allow the money to be garnished for child support payments. 25 state attorneys general and the Hawaii Office of Consumer Protection warned about the problem in a letter sent to Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, asking him to issue guidance protecting the payments from private debt collectors too. Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio and Republican Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri also called on the Treasury Department to prevent garnishment for private debts. Despite the bipartisan push, Treasury hasn't issued new guidance. The agency did not respond to a request for comment on Wednesday. Some states and local governments, including Massachusetts, Ohio, Illinois, and Washington, D.C., have issued their own orders to shield the stimulus payments from private debt collectors. These stimulus payments are meant to provide emergency assistance during the coronavirus outbreak. Though high-income earners are excluded, a majority of people are eligible for some money. That's coming out of nowhere. The IRS began sending out payments this week, starting with those who already had bank account information on file. That is something I don't ever recommend. Don't give the government your bank account information so that it could directly deposit the money. For others, the IRS will send out paper checks, though it could take weeks or even months for people to receive those. A collection agency can't garnish this check unless you deposit it into an account that it has access to. To avoid having the stimulus payment garnished by a debt collector, monitor your bank account closely and take out the money as quickly as possible, suggests Lauren Saunders, Associate Director at the National Consumer Law Center. Or you could just not take the check. You could not inflate the currency. Disclaimer, if you're starving, even you're not working, and that unemployment is drawing thin, take the check. Take the damn check. But man, if you've gone to work every day since all of this, send that shit back. I understand. You're looking at this as tax money coming back to you, but it's not. They're just printing this out of air. Think of the future. Think of inflation. All right, now we've got some other big news that's going on with this. Some more political battle. Trump threatens to adjourn both chambers of Congress. This is from Brett Samuels and Jordan Carney over at The Hill. President Trump on Wednesday threatened to use his executive power to force both chambers of Congress to adjourn if the Senate did not confirm his nominees for vacancies across the administration. The president, during a coronavirus briefing in the Rose Garden, offered a lengthy diatribe against what he described as congressional obstruction and argued confirming his nominees was more urgent than ever amid the pandemic. Why? Why? The Senate should either fulfill its duty and vote on my nominees, or it should formally adjourn so I can make recess appointments. Trump said, "We have a tremendous number of people that have come into government, and now more so than ever before because the virus and the problem. Lawmakers in both chambers are not expected to return to the Capitol until May 4th, but both the House and Senate have been conducting pro forma sessions in the meantime." Those sessions prevent Trump from making recess appointments. The current practice of leaving town while conducting phony pro forma sessions is a dereliction of duty that the American people cannot afford during this crisis, he said. "It's a scam. What they do, it's a scam, and everyone knows it, and it's been that way for a long time." Dude, the Senate is on your side. Settle the frack down. Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution grants Trump the power to, on extraordinary occasions, convene both houses, or either of them, and in case of disagreement between them, with respect to the time of adjournment, he may adjourn them to such time as he shall think proper. Why haven't we been doing this? Adjourn the Congress. Then they can't make laws. Bring them back when it's time to write the budget. And actually have them write a budget this time, because I'm sick of these spending bills. This means that in order for the president to step in and dismiss both, the GOP-controlled Senate would have to adjourn while the Democrat-held House objected. Senate Democrats also have procedural tools to prevent the Senate from adjourning. The National Constitution Center noted that no president has ever exercised this authority. "Perhaps it's never been done before. Nobody's even sure if it has," Trump said. "But we're going to have to do it. We need these people here. We need people for this crisis, and we don't want to play any more political games. They're great games. They're incredible games. I have the best games." Jonathan Turley, a constitutional law professor who appeared as a GOP witness during the House impeachment hearings, warned Trump against taking the step. "The president just said he may unilaterally adjourn Congress. This power has never been used and should not be used now," he tweeted. Senate Republicans were expected to set up another 3 weeks of pro forma sessions on Thursday afternoon to last through the chamber's new May 4th return date, after the date was pushed back because of the coronavirus. Spokesman for Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell didn't immediately say if Trump comments changed the GOP plan or if Republicans would now try to pass an adjournment resolution by unanimous consent, sparking a fight with the Democrats. Instead, a spokesman for the GOP leader said McConnell spoke with Trump on Wednesday about Senate Democrats' unprecedented obstruction of the president's well qualified nominees and shared his continued frustration with the process. When did we go back to filibuster? Because I'm pretty sure you just need a simple majority for this. I don't know. Why can't we just wait till May 4th? It's 3 weeks away. The Trump administration has been plagued by vacancies across the government. Trump has declined to nominate full-time appointees to key positions, instead relying on officials in acting capacities. 150 of the 749 key positions tracked by the Washington Post and Partnership for Public Service do not have nominees, while there are another 15 awaiting nomination. The DHS, a key agency in guarding against the coronavirus and other national security threats, has not had a full-time secretary in more than a year. A number of other top positions in the department remain unfulfilled. So, I'm going to look at another article on this. I know the Hill is kind of a little bit confusing in their language with this, but I'm going to look at another article on this from the Daily Wire. This is from Joseph Curl. Trump: I'll adjourn both chambers of Congress to appoint official government officials. President Donald Trump on Wednesday threatened to adjourn Congress in order to appoint judges and other federal officials to help deal with the coronavirus crisis. If the House will not agree to the adjournment, I will exercise my constitutional authority to adjourn both chambers of Congress. The current practice of leaving town while conducting phony pro forma sessions is a dereliction of duty that the American people cannot afford during this crisis, Trump said at a Wednesday House briefing. It's a scam. It's a scam what they do. Perhaps it's never been done before. Nobody's even sure if it has, but we're going to do it, Trump said. We need these people here. Many federal positions require Senate approval, and when the chamber is not in session, presidents can make recess appointments. The move sometimes draws criticism from the opposing party, but the action is not unusual. President Barack Obama made more than 30 such appointments during his 2 terms. Both chambers hold what are known as pro forma sessions, a process Republicans often use to prevent Obama from temporarily filling vacancies without approval by the Senate. The Senate can shut down, and senators can even go home while the chamber is technically in session. The current practice of leaving town while conducting phony pro forma sessions is a dereliction of duty that the American people cannot afford during this crisis, Trump said. It's a scam. What they do, it's a scam, and everyone knows it, and it's been that way for a long time. Even though Republicans control the Senate, Trump said Democrats have forced the Senate to spend lots of time in moving on confirmation of federal judges. That means there's no time for anybody else, and such positions, such as Director of National Intelligence and Undersecretary of Agriculture, to administer food programs, remain vacant. But it's unclear if Trump can actually adjourn Congress at the current time. Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution grants the President the power to, on extraordinary occasions, convene both houses or either of them, and in case of disagreement between them with respect to the time of adjournment, he may adjourn them to such time as he shall think proper. So I don't completely understand what's going on here, because if he adjourns everybody, then nothing gets pushed through at that point. Presidential historian Michael Beschloss wrote on Twitter that no president in history has ever used the constitutional power to adjourn Congress. And Jonathan Turley, a constitutional law professor who testified as a Republican witness during the House impeachment hearings, warned Trump against taking the unprecedented action. The president just said he may unilaterally adjourn Congress. This seems to be a reference to Article 2, Section 3, which gives a president in extraordinary occasions to convene or adjourn houses. This power has never been used and should not be used now. So if he adjourns, does that mean that they can't do anything else for the rest of the session? I'm going to look into this because I'm not 100% sure how this is working and why this is a problem. The president's threat to adjourn Congress comes just days after he declared that he, alone has the authority to open up the states. He doesn't. Trump said the decision will be up to him for many good reasons, and those states' governors have issued mandatory stay-at-home orders and have specific powers to do so under the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. For the purpose of creating conflict and confusion, some in the fake news media are saying it's the governor's decisions to open up the states. It is. Not that of the President of the United States and the federal government. Let it be fully understood that this is incorrect. Trump wrote on Twitter, "It is the decision of the President, and for many good reasons. With that being said, the administration and I are working closely with the governors, and this will continue. A decision by me, in conjunction with the governors and input from others, will be made shortly." Yeah, and it's going to get overturned in the Supreme Court in a hurry because, no, that's not your job, buddy. So, on other news, Kentucky lawmakers override veto of voter ID measure. This will be a little quick hitter here. Republican lawmakers in Kentucky have swept aside the Democratic governor's veto of a bill to require people to show a government-issued photo ID in order to vote. This is from WBKO out of Bowling Green, Kentucky, by the Associated Press, apparently. Votes to override Governor Andy Beshear's veto easily cleared the GOP-led Senate and House on Tuesday. The votes came as lawmakers reconvened for a wrap-up session amid the coronavirus outbreak. The ACLU of Kentucky promptly said it will consider filing legal action to try and halt the measure. The bill would require Kentucky residents to produce photo ID when voting, with limited exceptions starting with the November election. Yeah, they tried to do that here, too. For the same reason, they're going to try and say that it's unconstitutional because on a federal level, and I've been rallying about this for a long time, on a federal level, voter ID is unconstitutional per Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, where states are the ones that regulate presidential elections and all other elections going forward. You're going to have a lot harder time arguing that, and the ACLU has already lost this case numerous times across the country, including here in Wisconsin, because, yes, the states can go ahead and have a voter ID law, just as long as the federal government doesn't do it. So, that's going to be fun to see. Lastly, I've got an article from the McIver Institute, and this kind of goes along with what I've been saying with the Supreme Court and the Wisconsin election here. This is from Dan O'Donnell. How Bernie Sanders beat Daniel Kelly. Buried beneath a thick layer of spin and second-guessing is the universal truth about elections. The numbers don't lie. They are the cold and dispassionate antithesis to the months of push-polling, attack ads, and stump speeches that preceded them, and they tell the story of the election more completely than any of them. And the numbers from the Wisconsin Supreme Court election couldn't be clearer. Jill Karofsky didn't beat Justice Daniel Kelly, Bernie Sanders did. His presence in the race ensured that Democrat turnout would be sky high since the party's presidential primary was still technically contested. Tellingly, Sanders dropped out of the race the day after Wisconsin voted. Didn't I say that? But 5 days after any results were released, or 5 days before, rather, any results were released. His campaign knew that he didn't have a prayer in Wisconsin and hadn't had a prayer to win the nomination from Joe Biden for more than a month, yet he stayed in the race solely to boost turnout for Karofsky, a radical liberal darling backed by millions of dollars from out-of-state left-wing groups, including billionaire financier George Soros. Because of the coronavirus outbreak, neither Sanders nor Biden spent any time campaigning in Wisconsin, and because the race was effectively over long before, neither spent any money on ads in the state. What, then, did Sanders have to lose by staying in the race for a few extra weeks? His supporters are legendarily loyal to him, and proved it last Tuesday, casting 293,652 votes for him, even though he had no chance of winning in the election. Elizabeth Warren engendered similar devotion amongst the far left. She received 14,055 votes in the Wisconsin primary, even though she had dropped out of the presidential race 5 days before early voting began in the state. Sanders remaining president, spectral though it was, in Wisconsin ensured that liberal turnout in the state would be massive. 4 years ago, he won the state's Democratic primary with a staggering 57% to 43% shellacking of eventual nominee Hillary Clinton. Then, of course, his voters thought he still at least had a puncher's chance in stealing the nomination from her, not realizing that the Democratic Party had rigged the race against him. This year, he didn't have a chance, but his voters either didn't realize this or didn't care. They turned out for him anyway, pushing the total turnout in the Democratic primary to 924,151 votes. Even during a pandemic that had all but shut down Wisconsin, this total represented just an 8% decrease from the 1,003,904 votes cast in the 2016 Wisconsin Democratic primary. By contrast, President Trump did not face a primary challenger, and such his supporters, who are perhaps even more loyal than Sanders's, did not have an incentive to vote. This resulted in just 628,469 total votes cast in the 2020 Republican presidential primary, a 43% decrease from the 1,101,123 cast in 2016. This is well in line with recent primary history in Wisconsin. The last time one party had an incumbent president and the other had a contested primary was 2012, when Obama ran unopposed on the Wisconsin primary and eventual nominee Mitt Romney had to fend off a challenge from Rick Santorum. As in 2020, by the time Wisconsin came up on the primary calendar, Santorum's campaign was quixotic endeavor and existed more to boost the candidate's ego than anything else. Romney, like Biden, all but had the nomination sewn up when he won Wisconsin convincingly. With a contested primary, there were 787,847 votes cast on the Republican side, but just 300,255 total votes in the Democratic primary. Romney's 346,876 votes easily beat Obama's 293,914, yet Obama won Wisconsin over Romney that November rather easily. His higher vote total in the Wisconsin primary then was entirely the result of massively higher turnout among Republicans because theirs was the only contested race. So this is what I was saying right from the beginning. And I do want to point out the fact that there may have been more Republican turnout for this because there are people like me that just wanted to sow discord in the Democratic primary. I almost voted Sanders in the primary. I looked at the bubble and I couldn't do it. I could not mark the box for Sanders. I absolutely could not. But I thought about it. I did wind up voting for Tulsi. I didn't vote for Trump in the primary because he already has the nomination. There was no reason to do it. But I could throw a vote for Tulsi and throw some of the numbers and throw some of the statistics around so the statisticians had to be confused. And, well, I didn't have to do anything extra to confuse Biden. He's already confused by how his shoes work. But, yeah, just to throw things into confusion and throw things into chaos, I voted for Tulsi. So, but yeah, that's pretty much exactly what I was saying. Bernie dropped out the day after the Wisconsin primary without seeing what the results were. Because he wanted those sycophantic voters of his to come out and vote for Karofsky. And I do think that this would have been a very low turnout race had Sanders not been in the race. Because, like I said, we'd already had our primaries done, and nobody would have even heard about all of this. I mean, we've got the ads going around about Kelly and Karofsky. We had some text messages coming in. I got a text message for Dan Kelly, but for the most part, this is a down ballot race, or would have been a down ballot race, and nobody knew about it. But hey, as long as Bernie's on the ticket, let's get all the college students out to come and vote for Bernie. Come vote for Bernie. So, yeah, that is exactly what I was saying out of this. So, and of course, the Republicans thinking that they didn't need to come out and vote because the God Emperor Trump was the only one on the top of the ticket. I mean, still we had a bunch of them come out, but for the most part, the God Emperor was on the top, and they didn't feel that they needed to come out because he didn't have any challengers. So, yes. Absolutely. O'Donnell is right. Bernie Sanders beat Daniel Kelly, not Jill Karofsky. So that's going to be it's going to be a lot of things to look at as we go along here, and that's going to be a lot. It's getting late at this point, and I'm going to skip things I like and things I hate today. So We will see you back here tomorrow with more contemporary. I'm not going to oversleep tomorrow. So we'll get this out earlier because, of course, we do have to take some time and read everybody who chatted throughout the week because I'm never going to skip that because you guys warm my heart when you come in and chat for the morning and talk amongst yourselves. Even though I don't read it on the air, you're still in here talking, which means you're still in here listening, and I'm really excited for that. So thanks everybody who came by. We will see you back here tomorrow. And until then, I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary.